Do you crave better self-esteem and confidence, but struggle to silence your anxiety, fears, and insecurities? If so, welcome to the sisterhood of fellow travelers on the path to reclaiming their self-confidence and happiness. I'm Jennifer DeBellis, award-winning author, speaker, and assault survivor. I spent the past few decades helping young women like you overcome fear, self-doubt, and trauma to reclaim their joy and self-worth. I cannot wait to share the secrets I learned on my own healing journey and help you restore your inner warrior as I show you the skills and tools you need to save your own broken world. If you're ready to empower your inner warrior to overcome fear, doubt, and anxiety, turn off those distractions and tune in to this episode. In today's episode, we're going to confront the giants known as fear and doubt, as we continue on our journey toward improved self-worth and confidence. I know how hard it is to confront these fears, yet I have learned how it's possible and important for our quality of life to confront and overcome these obstacles. This is why I developed the Restore Your Inner Warrior series, where I share power-packed tools and tips that will help you strengthen your inner warrior and overcome the things holding you back from living your best life. I mean it when I say you really do hold the power to conquer these struggles, and you're just steps away from learning how and what to do next. Are you ready to boldly step into a life of happiness and confidence? If so, turn off those distractions running in the background so you can supercharge your healing journey with this next episode, and welcome back to those already walking with me down this restoration path. Previously, we explored the first two secrets to building and restoring our confidence, value, and purpose as we heal internally, wrestle with life's complexities and grit, and embrace an overcomer's mindset. This fourth episode in a 5-part series is dedicated to secret number 4. It's time to face the giants named fear and doubt. Inside this episode, you'll gain a better understanding of the roles fear and doubt play in your healing journey. We'll revisit a classic childhood movie to get a better perspective of how these things might play out, and learn actionable steps to powerfully confront these emotions. Tip number 1, do it despite the fear factor. Tip number 1, do it despite the fear factor. Tip number 2, choose to learn from fear. Tip number 3, take one thing and day at a time. And tip number 4, refuse to submit to doubt. In the final episode in this 5-part series, we will explore how to cut yourself free from the dead weight holding you back from living your best life. And before I forget, your next steps and ways to connect with me. If this podcast does inspire you, consider joining my free Facebook community, the Restore Your Inner Warrior Sisterhood. Here's a safe space to get tips, share stories, and find community. Okay, so in previous episodes, we talked about how bad things are going to happen from time to time and how important it is to grieve and heal from our emotional trauma so we don't get stuck in a wounded place or stuck in survival mode indefinitely. Today, we must talk about the giants named fear and doubt. To rebuild confidence and regain control over our well-being, we must face these giants. There's just no way around it. So let's begin with why fear is so confusing. Something I want to distinguish as we move forward is that fear and doubt are not interchangeable. They're different entities. If you think about fear and doubt are like fraternal twins, where they are twins, they come from the same, biological genetic pool, they come from the same parents, but they are two distinctly different looking, different acting, different individuals. So to begin, let's talk about fear and why it's so confusing. There are lots of areas of fear in our lives. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of abandonment, fear of loss, fear of getting hurt, and so forth. Fear is an emotion that acts like a sixth sense. So the emotion itself is sometimes rooted to our safety or sense of safety, which is why we often confuse every instance that when we feel fear as something that will hurt us, so we should avoid doing it at all costs because, right, it gave us that signal. But here's the thing, fear sends out this signal that either warns us that we might not be safe or that it tells us to question if we should be doing this thing that's in front of us. Signals are good. Don't ignore those raised hairs. and gut senses that you get. These signals are your internal compass's way of sounding an alarm to proceed with caution or retreat to safety. Or if we revisit that car dashboard analogy that I used in the last couple of episodes, fear is that sensor that goes off on the dashboard and it warns us, pull over and check underneath the hood, or proceed with caution, or get into the mechanic and get something serviced. The problem is, all you flight instead of fight people take every fear warning as a cue to get out and get out fast. Some things aren't even a threat, and yet you flee or freeze every time the emotion surfaces out of fear that the fear you feel has merit without ever putting it through a mental filter to know for sure. And in many instances, that thing with the fear attached to it, it can't be avoided. Flight often isn't even an option. Fear is a giant, unwelcome house guest who kind of moves into our internal world and eats up all of our confidence and anything valuable as it trashes the place. It's not just going to move out. And why would it when you give it a comfortable place to thrive? If allowed, fear will move in permanently and slowly suck the remaining life from you, your confidence, your self-worth, your purpose, and so forth. And it will invite other house guests like its brother doubt, which we'll get back to in a few minutes. Once fear does damage in your inner world, you must repair it unless you plan to live in a dilapidated space. So before we move on, I want to emphasize that you already hold the power to face and conquer fear, which kind of reminds me of a childhood story that maybe is from your childhood as well. You know the story, The Wizard of Oz, right? Well, Dorothy is on a quest to reclaim her confidence and discover her purpose. She doesn't quite understand that's what her journey is at the moment, but we, looking into her experience, we pick that up pretty quickly. With the aid of the magic ruby slippers, an eclectic cast of characters, she faces all sorts of fear that collectively begin to restore her confidence and self-worth. And she believes any progress that she makes is due to the power and the magic in the ruby slippers. The lesson she ultimately learns is that she is the one who holds all the power within and has had that power all along. She just needed to face each of these giant fears herself, with, of course, courage and the support and insights of the others that joined her along her journey. So Dorothy ultimately becomes the one who saves her own lost world. Even the Wizard of Oz doesn't have the power to do that. And in the end, she does recognize that she held that power all along, but she just didn't know how to do it or use it in her inner world. Dorothy ultimately becomes the one who saves her own lost world. And she held the power to do it all along, but didn't yet know how to use her inner warrior powers. I know it's scary and takes courage to face fear, no matter how small it might be, but it's necessary in order to build and rebuild our broken areas of confidence and value. You know that warrior heroism concept I keep mentioning? Well, heroines dare to do difficult and challenging things because they know they must push past the obstacles holding them back from what they want or need to accomplish. They may even tremble, flinch, cringe, take a step back or two, have to go back, regroup, come back at it again. But then, once they've done that mental regrouping and they get back to the necessary work before them, they realize that no one else is going to come and save and fix their broken world. So they know that they have to regroup and get back in there. My own Wizard of Oz story occurred during those first few weeks of recovery after my motorcycle accident I mentioned in previous episodes. Remember the list of fears that I mentioned? Those things I was afraid of? I feared I wouldn't grow new skin in time to wear my wedding dress. I feared the pain would never ease up. I feared I might never walk right again. I feared that I wasn't going to recover my high energy, thrill seeking lifestyle. I feared God had forsaken me because He didn't just give me the miracle healing I had been praying for. But for those of you who are faith people like I am, you know how those miracles go. They're exceptional occurrences rather than the norm. Instead of outright deliverance for my injuries, my prayers were met by guidance and resources and some tools that I needed in some rather unlikely forms. Where Dorothy receives help with her matters of heart, thinking, and courage through her interactions with Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Cowardly Lion, I received this help as I pushed through my growing list of fears and worked with therapists at Whirlpool treatment and physical therapy while reimagining how to still pull off my dream wedding and honeymoon, which let me just say, I pulled both of those off and I had new skin in time. Yet, as I navigated so many scary details and developments during this time, I had to really dig deep for courage to face my fears, and I had to dig even deeper for some of the answers I needed to restore myself and live my best life. I took one thing a day at a time. Rehabilitation had many setbacks and painful instances. I kept reminding myself, if God believed in me, I must be capable of doing some powerful and extraordinary things. My faith in this empowered me to take a step and another step and another step in the face of the fear and doubt. I just kept doing it. Years later, I look back at this and I wonder how I got through so much in such a short amount of time. When I shared this with a friend, I don't know, a couple of years ago, she said, if not for God. And that got me thinking. I replied, well, it's more like, if not for God telling me, you can do this, I believe in you. Then he left me to do the important work. He didn't do the work for me. He knew that I needed to go through those experiences and I need to do those things that reshape my character and reshape my thinking, which we're talking about here today, is we're really talking about reshaping our thinking that then reshapes our actions. And I learned to believe in myself during this time as I faced these fears and found ways to work around them to do what needed to get done. If you're wondering what drove me, it's that I refused to settle for the alternatives. My heart was set on figuring out how to still achieve my desires. I didn't want to just resign to a life where my pain and limitations grew rather than diminished over time. I refused to accept my wedding might not happen, which was already postponed a year. While I wasn't entirely sure how my future would look, I did have hope that things would get better with the right care and attention. I had that end game mindset that believed I could heal physically and emotionally, even if my new normal looked and felt a little different. Then I backtracked, like I've been talking about in previous episodes, and I did everything I could to work toward my ultimate desire to regain my quality of life. Now, doubt is that other emotion that we struggle with that usually stems from fear. Again, it's fear's fraternal twin. They're genetically similar, but they're not identical. Doubt is literally a mindset of uncertainty or our lack of belief in our abilities or that certain things are possible. This is how it's often confused as fear. Doubt is a place of indecision trapped between belief and disbelief. When it comes to the possible things in our lives, there is no room for disbelief or total rejection of taking necessary action. So let's revisit that dashboard analogy. Doubt is that one symbol that lights up that we can never figure out what it belongs to. The one where you Google it and you're looking, you take a picture and you're looking for it and nothing is coming up, or the only thing that's coming up in the search engine is, yeah, we have no idea what that is for. uh, you know, I talk about this as being a nothing burger. It has no significant purpose other than to confuse and derail us and get us off track. Because again, it's really testing our belief in our ability to do certain things or our belief that a certain outcome is possible. And I'm not talking about unrealistic things. I'm talking about living in a state of realism, a world that we know that things are possible. So I'm not saying like if you just believe you can fly, that you could fly. Well, yeah, technically you could probably get a drone or get on a plane or hang glide or do other things that you could fly, but you can't fly without the aid or help of something. Something else is going to have you, help you do that. That's not the type of belief and disbelief, the state of belief and disbelief that I'm talking about. I'm talking about where we doubt something
and we've experienced it in the past, and maybe it hasn't gone entirely the way that we wanted it to go, but we know enough about the experience itself to know that everything didn't go, horribly wrong. There were some things that we could take away from it that we thought next time we go back or next time I go through an experience like that, I will do this or say this or get out of there, sooner, or whatever those things are, so that we know we have a belief, and that belief is stemmed from being able to trust our prior experiences, if that makes any sense. I don't know if you share my faith, but I want to share something about how my views of doubt have been reshaped through my spiritual life. In biblical texts, we are promised that doubt is overcome through prayer and hope. Eventually, seemingly impossible things can be achieved through hope and the practice of believing in our desired outcomes. It's this sort of, manifestation where we see it. We see the end. We have the end in mind. We believe that it's possible. We've envisioned it. We want it really bad. And so when we want something really bad, we'll do what it takes to get it. This is where the root of my look to the future and trace backward outlook comes from. It really comes from, way back even in my childhood when I started to learn those lessons in Bible study about, understanding the promises of a future and putting my hope in that future and learning that that kind of a formula can be applied to so many things in life. And so sometimes, yes, we need a little evidence that things will work out and that, things come in the form of witnessing others or ourselves live and thrive when we refuse to let go or let things stop us. So when it comes to self-doubt, this is rooted to little to no confidence in our own abilities. That's why you could see how it just becomes this very counterintuitive, almost like of two minds. You've got this one emotion that is constantly at odds with each other, and it's of two minds. And when we're trying to deal with something in real time, we've got this argument, these emotions arguing inside of our head. And so, of course, you get that kind of like frozen deer in headlights look because you don't know which voice to listen to. So, as you can see, doubt can become one of those things that really kills our self-esteem and confidence because it keeps us in a constant state of I don't know this like you're just unsure, you're constantly unsure of what to do. So through this experience and so many that followed, for me, I learned some simple, even if not always easy, tricks to conquer these giants named fear and doubt. So, trick number one, we really just need to do it despite the fear factor. We have to acknowledge the fear and navigate a specific experience or interaction while we feel the fear. This is a go at your own pace thing. You don't have to, take on the whole world in one sitting, especially the first time you try to just do these exercises. And what will begin to happen is that we will get through it, whatever that it is. And we will see that it wasn't as bad as we feared it was going to be, or that fear had us believing where things would lead, which is ultimately the failure, the rejection, the abandonment. Those things may happen, but most of the time, we're trying to confront that fear, not control the outcomes that happen. So, trick number two is choose to learn from the fear. We must reframe how we view things we fear, like that rejection and abandonment and failure. And we need to reframe our thinking to learn from these prior experiences. As we confront fear, is there something our experience is trying to show or tell us? Were there areas we didn't get it entirely right? Did we fail in some way? Did we contribute in some way to not having things play out as we imagined them? Were there things outside of our control that we need to make peace with? In any of these instances, look for ways to use your experience to improve future interactions. Be willing to acknowledge the areas you hope to personally improve or that will get better next time. And when applicable, forgive yourself, others, and the circumstances. We have to walk in that grace, We have to have that mercy to be willing to forgive. A lot of times we're not just dealing with these fears of just confronting like mean people. Yeah, that's an exceptional thing. Most of the time, we're confronting fears that have to do with situations and people that are in our regular life. So we're human, they're human. The world is very unpredictable. Sometimes it's predictably unpredictable. So we have to be willing to let some things go and make peace with some things. And then obviously not forget what it is we need to learn. But I'm going to say maybe you can forget some of the other stuff. You need to figure out what you should forget and what you should remember because you're constructively trying to improve your quality of life. You're trying to improve that toolkit that you have that helps you navigate experiences despite some of these emotions like fear and doubt and all the anxiety that gets stirred up when these two get stirred up. You're just trying to navigate these things. So set your mind toward the future outcomes you desire and resolve to do better next time. That's all you can do. And if we notice other emotions surfacing, like I just mentioned, consider working through the grief stages that that it's connected to. If you missed me talking about the grief stages, in previous episodes. I'm going to drop some links below so that you can tune into those. And I also cover them in my self-help book, Warrior Sister, Cut Yourself Free. And there's links to that below as well. And what I just want to just briefly mention here is that there are various exercises that I list in the book, but I want to just focus on one here with just that strength training to grow your confidence by trying to do something in the face of fear, no matter how small the fear is. You don't, again, have to um, you don't have to pick huge things. So it takes courage to face fears, no matter how small it is. So that whole go big or go home philosophy, hang that one up at the coat tree for now. Don't bring that into the experience. Just pick something that holds you back in any way. It can be big, small, or in between. If you're trying to confront a fear that is big, it's okay to only tackle something small within it. The idea is to do something despite the fear. I remember the first time I do not like spiders. I'm even going to talk about something that is just a natural fear, and a lot of people do not like spiders. And I'm not saying you got to go and hold the spider and make friends with the spider. I don't know that I ever want to do that. I'm not going to lie. But I picked small things within it. So one day I was staying with a friend of mine in Florida, and he didn't warn me before I came because he probably didn't realize that I would be afraid, or he probably didn't want me to not come if he knew I was afraid. And I walk in the door and I'm setting my bags down and we're talking, and I'm not paying attention to the whole surrounding of the house. And I notice the tank, and I'm like, he's got a son, so I'm like, is that a hamster in there? Like, what's in this tank? And then I see the spider, the big tarantula, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to walk by this thing every single time I go upstairs where I'm supposed to sleep. And so I already have a toolkit. I already know. I've already done things like coexist with spiders. And I work outside all the time, and I live on a 6-acre estate. We have a natural marsh in our backyard, so it's very wet. And so we have spiders. And when I'm outside, I have made peace with them being in my environment, and small steps where it's just set your stuff up here, knowing that that's that spider web right there. And you're going to be okay. Right. I live in a place where these spiders are not poisonous, most of them. And so I don't have, a real and present danger fear, that I have to contend with in these instances. So keep that in mind too if you're confronting fear of spiders and sharing space with them. But because I had already been practicing and taking little tiny steps, I then came into this situation where I was like, okay, I am going to exercise some of the same things that I do when I'm in the wild with spiders. And, despite the fear, I have to get up those stairs to sleep, and I have to come down in the morning. And I'm not always going to see the spider or make eye contact with all 8 of his eyes, right? I'm not going to make contact with all of the eyes. And I need to do some certain things and have some certain thoughts as I'm doing that. So the fear, the hairs on the back of my neck are certainly going to stand up every single time. But I'll tell you what, as I just looked at the spider, reminded myself that it's in a contained, controlled environment, that it cannot get out. Even if it does get out, it's probably not going to come near me. It's probably not going to harm me. I know it's not going to harm me. Okay. It doesn't have its poison in it. I have to, I had to keep telling myself all these things. But the only thing that I really tackled was making sure that where I looked into the cage every single time I went by because I didn't want to walk ignoring. I didn't want to become that person. And I try to do this in other areas too. I try not to put on blinders that lead me to miss things like in my peripheral or things right in front of my face that I should be seeing. I don't want to miss those things. And so that was one thing that was super important to me. Make contact, look at the tank every single time. And I'll tell you what, sometimes the spider was out, sometimes the spider wasn't out. But as I started going up and down those stairs more often, that fear just really did dissipate. So in that instance, the fear completely left. I walked by the cage every single time and I was fine. I was fine because I had made peace and I knew every time I went by, nothing bad actually happened. And so I took those experiences, I took my previous experiences, I just kept doing that thing. And by the end of my trip, I was completely unfazed by it, which was a huge step for me. And I don't think I've ever reached that stage with big spiders like that. So that was a pretty big thing. And I know it doesn't entirely deal with what I'm talking about here as far as fear of rejection, but that was like a fear of danger, like a fear of this thing's going to hurt me. And so, the idea is just to do it despite the fear. And in my case, I kept doing it so many times. If I did it like 3 dozen times the whole time I was there, then great, I conquered it. But if you're going to still, I mean, if you still get tripped up and you make small progress, smaller than you hoped for, remind yourself that you did a very courageous thing, no matter the outcome. And if you don't make all the progress you desire, keep coming back to the exercise with new knowledge that you gained from previous experiences. And sometimes it's not just the new knowledge, sometimes you have to go outside of that and look up new skills and new tools. At the end of the experience, the important thing is to come back and mentally regroup, meditate on how you navigated the fear, and note what you will do the same in the future and anything you plan to do differently. And again, be gracious and patient with yourself. You are a work in progress. That is the whole point. Not that you arrive at this place of perfection and you have no other areas to grow in. Trick number 3, take one thing and day at a time. Confronting and overcoming fear takes intentional time and attention along with training. It's not a sprint, it's a long distance sport. Think of it like a marathon or maybe one of those, you know, Ironman type of things. What are they, 50, 100 miles? I don't know. I have a crazy friend who does them, and I can't even get through a marathon yet, but I know I'm going to do one day. You have a whole lifetime to confront fear and doubt in real time and on your own terms. This is why it's important to do that strength training that makes you stronger and better prepared for those real time instances. So, what I mean by that, let me back up a second. Sometimes you are in the real time where you didn't say, oh, let me just try something in the face of fear. You are placed in something in real time and boom, the fear arises in the middle. You didn't plan for it. Nobody gave you a trigger warning at the beginning of it. And newsflash, life doesn't come with trigger warnings. So nobody gave you a trigger warning. You're there, you're in the middle of it. You can't escape it. You can't not go through whatever you have to go through. That's what I'm talking about. That's one way. So then you hopefully have skills and you have things to do. But then there's this other thing that I talk about in the 30-day restoration journey at the back of Warrior Sister Cut Yourself Free, which it talks about fear. It confronts fear one of the days every week. So this is that exercise that you're intentionally picking something that you hope to strength train. You hope to get better at dealing and navigating with this particular emotion and its connection to fear. And so that's the other one where you're there's going to be times where it's a real-time instance, and now you just got to act and you got to draw upon all that knowledge and skills and everything you've learned from previous experiences. And then there's those times where you're setting yourself up, where you're like, okay, I am going to intentionally try to do this. Like, I am going to intentionally walk up to a new person in this particular event or environment and just start a conversation. That's a step. Even though I'm afraid of rejection and I feel like everywhere I go, nobody cares about talking to me and all those other things, you're going to do that. And I talk in great detail about how I treat that like a science experiment in my first episode in this series. But I'm not going to get back into that right now. But just to say that sometimes you have the real time, and then sometimes you're going to set yourself up to practice. It's like a practice run. And those are the types of things that I try to set up in that it's day 5 of each week, that confront a fear. And that's where you pick something that you're going to try. And you can try it. There's so many ways you can try it. You can try it by journaling. You can try it by picking one small thing to try. And, I'm thinking of a story that kind of relates to this when I keep saying, like, just pick one thing within it. Because what happens is if you try to pick too many things at the same time, you can't master all of those things at once. And you can only really focus on maybe one or two things. You know, that idea that, oh, I'm a really good multitasker. Okay, but let's talk about multitasking. You only have 100% attention. So when you start with 100% attention and then you introduce things, I'm at 90% attention here and I'm at 10% just looking to see what that notification was that came through. And then you start to shift it. Maybe I'm looking at this more, and now all of a sudden I'm 100% on this, and I'm 0% on the other thing that I was doing just now. And that fluctuates. And maybe you're going like kind of 50-50. And so, that's when you're like in an interaction with someone else. You really can't give two things 100% of your attention. The same is true when you're trying to do multiple things and you're trying to make changes to what you just normally go through without thinking about the motions. You just, right, you would just go through the motions in a lot of ways. So now you're coming to something and you're saying, oh, I have to make these 4 different corrections, but I can't focus on all 4 of those. So this happened to me one time, and this has been such a good metaphor that happened in a literal situation for me that I'm going to share with you right now. So I'm a runner, and years ago, one of the running stores where I get my shoes, and I used to do running club with them, they had the people from Brooks coming in, and they were giving away discounts, giving away free shoes. That gets you in there, right? And what they were doing is they were collecting data from all these people who were willing to come up there at a shot for getting the discount, at a shot for getting the shoes. And they had their computer system hooked up to the treadmill, and then they hooked up these electrodes on you. I don't remember exactly how they were, but they hooked us up to something. They were just checking maybe our heart rate, and I'm not sure entirely, I don't remember, but it doesn't matter. So this guy goes before me, and they were just putting the treadmill on, pulling the key off, and then putting the key back on. So he goes before me. He's like 6'3", much better shape than I am. And he's a dude who just has legs that are twice the length of my legs. So he's on the treadmill before I am. I'm not really paying attention to how this treadmill thing is going. So now the rep turns and is like, hey, would you like to hop on? And I'm like, absolutely. So I get on the treadmill and I get all hooked up. They put the key back on and it immediately goes up to, he was running at about a 7.2, which I used to be a sprinter, but you don't just start out that fast, especially, again, this guy's I'm 5'6", just to put it in perspective. He was a lot taller than I am. And younger. He was younger than I am too. And so I get on the treadmill and now I'm sprinting right away. So now I'm having to open my stride up more and I'm dying right away. My heart rate goes through the roof pretty quickly. I have to run for 2 minutes like this. I'm trying to turn it down and I'm kind of embarrassed, and it is what it is. So I get through it. I finally hop off the treadmill. I'm out of breath. I tried to do my best. At least I know enough about running to have tried to get what I could get out of the testing that they were running, because what they were trying to get us to do was make sure we were in the right shoes, because they had several different shoes there. So they wanted to make sure, how do we pronate? So they were recording us. They were actually looking at how, what our stride looked like. Do our feet roll out, roll in, whatever. There was a bunch of things that they were looking at. So now the guy comes back to me, and some of the advice he was giving me really couldn't be even applicable because I had to run like a maniac once that thing got plugged back in. And that really wasn't how I run long distance. That was how I, work up to a sprint. And so he gives me all these pointers. He's like, okay, he's like, you're in the right shoes. And he says, work on slowing down your stride. Hello. But he said, shorten my stride. So he goes, slow down your stride and shorten your stride. So, I was taking obviously I was kind of leaping, trying to keep up with that conveyor belt going. He says, take smaller strides. And I was like, I'm going to pay attention when I go out for the group run now because maybe I do have too big of a stride and I'm not, in high school anymore running these races and I have to have a different mindset and different strategies and techniques. So he's like, shorten your stride. He said, he told me something to do with my breathing. And, when the heart rate gets up, it's 2 breaths in, 1 breath out. He says, do that drill. That'll help get your heart rate down. And he said, work on the way that I was using my hands. So that's the third thing. And then the fourth thing he said, make sure you roll back your shoulders and you keep your posture up. And he was telling me like where to keep my chin and all these different things. So he gives me all these different tips. And I'm trying to filter all of this through the fact where I'm like, dang it. I wish you could have really seen how I run regularly because some of it I'm like the posture thing. I don't know if I was just dying and just leaning forward and just doing everything wrong because I was really in survival mode instead of just leisurely jogging like I normally would if I'm going for several miles. But I went out on the run and right away, I'm with some of these younger individuals. I just so happen to be right behind them. And right away, just like on the treadmill, I start out at too fast of a pace. I'm not with people that go my pace. So right away, my heart rate's up and I'm like, dang it. So now I'm trying to focus on 2 breaths in, 1 breath out, 2 breaths in. But now I'm trying to like, okay, shorter strides, shorter strides. And then I'm paying attention. I'm like, oh yeah, even going this way, I do need to shorten up my stride. More strides will actually take less energy. And I'm trying to reconcile that in my head. And then I'm like, oh crap, I got to roll my shoulders back. And then I would be focusing. And then I was like, oh, my arms right after. And I'm trying to focus on all four of these things, and I'm miserably screwing everything up. And then I'm having to stop, walk it out, and I'm getting mad at myself, and I'm so frustrated. And if any of you are athletic, you know that if you get frustrated, the whole thing's going to suck. There's hardly ever the chance that you're just going to rebound it back and you're going to salvage it. It's overshadowed. It's overshadowed by how you're just irritated. So now I'm like, okay, I'm just going to focus on my stride. Once I got my breathing down, I'm like, stop pacing with other people. I put on music that was going to help pace me, changed my playlist. I'm just going to focus on me. I'm going to block people out. But I never fully regained my breath and tried working on all these different things. And it just felt like complete, utter failure. And if I walked away from that experience saying, I'm never going to run again. Well, I'm never going to try that again. I'm never going to let somebody critique me. I'm never going to, whatever, the list. I'm never going to, never going to, never gonna. You could keep doing that. Then I would have robbed myself because, yes, nobody likes, I have a fear of being laughed at and ridiculed. And it does stem from my childhood of those things happening. And I don't know that you necessarily overcome that, you just navigate the fear, just like kind of how we're talking about here. So I do things, and in the back of my head, I am trying to make sure like I don't do something, intentionally stupid that makes people laugh at my expense. So that is, maybe you're going to call that a trauma trigger or a trauma. That's fine. It exists and I navigate it. And I don't allow the fear to keep me from going into these new settings or being around people who may judge me or may think they're better than I am, and all that pressure that we go, that I don't measure up, whatever. I had to say, I don't care. I don't care what people thought of me in that moment. I think anybody with a brain could see when they put that treadmill on, it was a train wreck from the very first step. And I had to just be gracious and take the lesson, which was focus on one thing on your next run. Focus on another thing on your next run. I didn't even say do two things. I said you're only allowed one thing. And I would focus on that one thing and I would really just try to block the other stuff out. So when my the voice in my head said, well, fix your shoulders too. Nope, not today. I'm going to focus on my stride. And I would just keep bringing myself back in. Don't worry, the shoulders we'll work on the shoulders next, but I want to get to this stride thing to where I'm not thinking about it, where it becomes second nature. I'm literally trying to train myself to do something without thinking about doing it. I'm reprogramming a behavior. And so I was taking one thing at a time. So that is, that's my long story of using the running exercise and the two different experiences attached to it to just be like, it's okay. Just don't try to master it all at once. Just adjust those little tiny things. So that's, one of the ways that you do one thing at a time is just that. You just take it and you focus on it and don't worry about the other stuff. You'll have other opportunities. And if you don't have other opportunities, create the opportunities. Give yourself opportunities to practice, to role play, to do those things. And here's the thing. I know I sometimes I get messages from people, or if they're reviewing my book, or I've just talked to them after a speaking engagement, or they write to me after an engagement, after meeting them, and they say, well, you didn't talk about this and you didn't talk about that. And there's clinical cases and there's this, and that could be confusing and that could be misleading to someone. Look, we're talking about self-help strategies here in this podcast. I'm talking about self-help strategies in the books that I'm talking about, the other resources that I point you toward. Sometimes you're going to need to get outside help when you're trying to confront these giants named fear and doubt. And if things start to feel like they're more than you can handle, you have to be willing to tell yourself it's time to bring in outside help. So it can be a therapist or a counselor. It can be a trusted friend. It could be a life coach. It could be, somebody who you trust, like a loved one or a family member, or just a mentor, someone that you look up to. You have to know and be able to distinguish those things and find resources like this podcast and the self-help book that I'm telling you about that I wrote, or other self-help books or resources that I also share with you on these episodes, because you're always looking to expand your toolkit. Okay, this brings me to the last trick. Trick number 4, refuse to submit to doubt. The only guaranteed failure is to not even try. It's 100%. You will fail 100% of the time if you don't even try. So that's the only time you're guaranteed results. You're not guaranteed results if you try in all these different things. In the first episode, I talked about the science experiment that I do with overcoming my fear of rejection by going into these social settings and looking for those one-on-one interactions. And I said I have about a 95% success rate in those instances, but it took me a very long time to figure out that I'm more introverted than extroverted, and I look for more people who are introverted as well, because that sets me up for that one-on-one. They're often off by themselves, awkwardly, probably hoping either they can get the heck out of there really fast because it's very awkward to just stand there by myself, or that someone will come up to them and take the pain away, start talking to them, start a conversation. And 95% of the time I have a success rate, and that's an A. It's almost an A plus. That's a very high success rate. I'm not saying you're guaranteed to have a high success rate, because it took me a lot of failed tries to entering bigger group dynamics, to doing different things. It took me different types of combinations in order to find that one formula that works for me. And again, it even comes down to if I start to approach someone and I can see right away, I'm reading their body language, like, oh, this is right away, they're already closing the door on me. And I got 20 more, I got 20 more feet to go and they've already closed the door and I can read it all over them. Then I know I'm not even going to keep walking. I nod my head, I go another way, they don't have to know, and then I regroup. Even if you have to do that over and over and over again, you're learning about what works, what doesn't work. And again, that end game mindset. If you are longing for that personal connection with other people, and you say, that's my desired outcome, that I'm going to meet new people, or that I'm going to talk to people, that I'm going to be confident, that I'm going to enjoy functions. Like, you don't always have to connect and be best friends outside of every single event. I cannot tell you how many times I give my information to people, I never hear from them again. I'm not like, oh gosh, I wonder if they were just faking it, if they really didn't like me. I could tell that they enjoyed our interactions. You don't always have to carry that over into life outside of that event. And it doesn't matter. That doesn't make that a failed effort. My goal was to enjoy the event and to connect with other people and, you know, just learn from them and enjoy myself and talk about like interest things. And my God, make this 2 hour event feel like it's an hour and not 10 hours. You know how that goes. So I want to enjoy things. I want to enjoy people. And I want to be accepted in those environments. And so I have to figure out what is that acceptance going to look like? And I have to learn through trial and error. What is it going to look like? What am I going to do to initiate that type of stuff? So I have to be willing to sometimes take the first step, or, you don't always have to be the initiator. Just have a plan for when someone else approaches you, if that's your end game. So we can't sit there in a frozen state saying, oh, I'm so afraid to just take that first step, which is to just smile back at the person walking toward me who I know is going to try to start a conversation with me. We have to already know, how do we want to inhabit this space? How do we want this interaction to start, to go? Those are the types of things you have to dream. You have to allow yourself to dream. So you have to have the end dream in mind, and then you have to allow yourself to dream about how that might play out and how you might navigate that space. Does it go that way? No. But anybody who knows, if you've rehearsed something where you're like, oh, I'm a nervous wreck about this job interview, and you rehearse it, you sit down with someone, you go through, you role play. Now you're sitting by yourself, you're talking in the mirror, you're doing all of these different things, and maybe none of it happens, but you were prepared with a whole arsenal of things that you were ready. So you knew if someone asked you a question, all right, I'm going to pause for a second and I'm going to think about something we've already said and I'm going to build on that. So like that's a really good concept that works really well in situations where you're not trying to reinvent every single answer. You're building a momentum on things. So that's maybe a tip for you if you're job interviewing or you're just interacting with someone else, is that it's a lot easier to keep building on concepts that you've already talked about, or to digress from that concept into something familiar instead of landing in a whole different landscape over and over and over again, like Dorothy does when she goes from Kansas to Oz. If and when doubt creeps in, and it'll wake up anxiety, you know it's going to do that. You have to look it straight in the eye and say, well, at least I'm trying. What's your excuse? I know that might sound silly, but we have to keep saying to ourselves, at least I'm trying. I want something and I'm willing to try and I'm willing to fail and I'm willing to learn and I'm willing to adjust because I want that thing. And there's no way around that. We can't sit through life and expect everything to just land in our laps. We're not a baby who can't do things and we sit in our crib and we cry and we kick and we scream until the people and they're trying to figure out on the outside, like, what the heck does she want? We're not in that situation. And so we can't go through life sitting and then getting bitter and resentful that the things that we really want aren't happening if we are not trying to go after those things. If we aren't trying to say, whatever's in my way, it might slow you down. It might stop you in that moment. I'm not saying you're going to be able to come in and confront every single thing and go through these fear things. Sometimes you are going to have to get the heck out of there. There are those instances. Those are not the instances that I'm really talking about here and focusing on when you do have the power and doing what's within your power to navigate these experiences. These are the things that we're talking about here. So then you need to take what doubt says in the spirit of uncertainty under advisement. So don't simply ignore or dismiss it without quickly filtering it first. Assess the facts, motives, and the decisions at hand. So when doubt starts to say belief, unbelief, and that fight starts to happen in your head, go ahead and put it through the filter system. Okay? Figure out, is there something here that I need to change my course of action? Or is there a rooted disbelief here that keeps causing me to get into this chronic cycle that's keeping me from what I ultimately want? You need to do that because you're going to see different things. And then you're going to have to validate these areas of distrust and those that weaken your faith in your desired outcomes. So you have to spend the time and recognize it. If you just get to a point where you're like, oh, doubt, nope, nope, right, nope, shutting it down, then you might not get at the root cause of what keeps causing the doubt that maybe isn't merited. Or you might not get at the root cause that is merited. It's that instance, for instance, when maybe you have this fear of abandonment and this fear of rejection because you keep going into this similar or the same atmosphere and you do get rejected, or you're not in the clique, and it feels miserable every time you go in. So now you're going in there and that doubt starts to creep in. Well, they're probably going to ignore me, or they're probably going to pretend they didn't see me right away. All those things, right? I'm not going to hash them all out, but it's a valid doubt. Your disbelief is like from past experience, from a chronic pattern of past experiences. So you need to validate those areas and know what drives that distrust, what drives those, that weakened faith that I have in these situations or situations like those. Because again, you're strength training yourself. And if you can recognize those things, then you can be more empowered with how you react in those situations. So learn what you can about your triggers, your skepticism, your distrust, and how these hinder your decisions and actions. And if you have a strong belief that contradicts or hinders your forward movement, test the spirit, as the saying goes, and see how it does or does not line up with what you already know to be true and or possible. Decide not to proceed with certain actions or decisions if merited. Again, then proceed, even if it's with caution. You still have to navigate through it. Now you proceed. And it can be with the caution and also with the skills and the tools and the strategies that you already know or that you're trying to figure out. Do they work? Okay. Refuse to allow your fear of failure, of the unknown, to cause you to indefinitely delay or reject taking action that leads to your ultimate desired outcomes. Okay. Again, if you are constantly not trying and not doing things because you're telling yourself it's better to not feel rejected, or it's better to not let somebody reject me. But if we refuse to never try it, the only person that loses in that instance is you. So if you're saying, I'm never going to try this thing, again, 100% of the time, you'll lose 100% of the time, but there's nothing worse. You're still going to feel that rejection. Like, there's social media, for instance. So if you're saying, I'm not going to go to these things, and then you start to see the pictures of everybody just having a great time, life is better without you here. You start to feel that. Life is better without you here. That fear of rejection or those feelings of rejection are still there. So you're still going to experience that emotion of rejection or not being accepted, even when you choose not to ever enter into those things. In instances where you get to see or you hear, oh my God, it was the best event, you missed it. And you're like, right? That same emotion will surface. A lot of times, whether you actually go into the situations and the outcomes don't play out exactly how you wanted them to, or at all how you wanted them to, or you don't go. They're gonna play out that way. Over time, you will learn that your boldness and confidence in the face of fear and doubt actually empower and encourage you. All the strength training you do works to restore your inner warrior and helps you grow in your power and confidence as you work through negative emotions and emerge empowered with stronger beliefs and courageous actions that beat fear and doubt. I promise when you do this necessary work, one day these giants won't seem so big and scary. There might be a day that they visit you in the future and you'll think, oh, those little things? And then you lift your foot and you squash them like a bug underneath your foot.
Well, girl, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, don't forget to follow my channel and share it with girlfriends who also want to restore their self-worth and confidence. Also, If this podcast inspired you, consider leaving a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. And as you go through your day, may your empowered spirit, heart, and mind guide you. Catch new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Ciao.